Radical reforms and austerity measures could be doing more harm than good, a recent report has stated. With bailouts and budget cuts a very real reality for Eurozone countries, austerity measures are being scrutinised now more than ever. Here to tell us his views on the clear path to austerity is Dr. Frank Hollenbeck. Dr. Frank, thank you very much for coming in today. A new report by the International Labour Organization has criticised harsh austerity measures, claiming that they're having devastating consequences on the job market, which is anticipated to experience a downturn soon enough. Is this the case?
Well, let's look at austerity measures, what they really mean. We have announcements, for example, stating that we need to cut government expenditures by $60 billion and we need to raise taxes by $40 billion. But when we say that we've had government cuts in government spending, we've had planned cuts in government spending. For example, in Great Britain, of the planned cuts, we've only had 6% actually be implemented. Of the planned reductions in benefits, we've only had a reduction of 12% that's been planned. Now, so that's on one side. On the other side is the increase in taxes. They say we're going to increase taxes by 40 billion. What they really mean is that we're going to increase tax rates, and we hope that it raises 40 billion in revenues. Okay, and here's where we run into the problem, what is called the Laffer curve. And the Laffer curve is a very simple concept. It says that if tax rates are zero, then tax revenues are going to be zero. And if tax rates are 100%, then tax revenues will also be zero. The reason is people simply won't work. So in other words, you have a relationship where you have an increase in tax revenues as you increase tax rates, but then it starts declining. And so in other words, you have a tax rate that gives you the maximum tax revenues. And the empirical studies have shown that some of the European countries may be on the wrong side of the Laffer curve, which means that by increasing tax rates, you're actually going to reduce tax revenues.
What would you suggest to get out of this mess then? And is an alternative solution even feasible at present?
Well, what I would suggest, and I've actually said it in several different interviews, is what the U.S. did in 1921, which is that I would cut taxes significantly. Okay, I would cut taxes maybe 35%. And this would allow us actually to simplify the tax code. But it also means that I would have to cut government expenditures by more than 35%. And when I talk about cutting government expenditures, I don't mean tinkering around the edges. I'm talking taking the axe. That implies selling off government businesses. It implies selling off government assets. We also need to put into question the welfare and entitlement system that we have. The problem with unemployment insurance, the way we have it structured, is that if you make it attractive to be unemployed, you're going to have more unemployed. And that's just the way it works. Now, the problem we have today is that we're in a situation where it's really the increase in taxes that's leading to a recession. In other words, we're in a situation where businesses are facing higher corporate taxes. They're facing higher taxes on the products they sell by increases in the TVA. They're facing increases in regulations coming out of Brussels. And we have a situation where we no longer have sound money. The central bank's LTRO is putting into question what will happen to inflation into the future. And therefore, we've created an environment where it's very difficult for businesses to make investment decisions. And growth comes from basically capital investment. And we don't really have the environment to induce capital investment today.
So if what you're suggesting isn't possible at the moment and it isn't feasible, what do you foresee actually happening for the rest of 2012 and into the future?
First, François Hollande is going to find that he's going to be very constrained. The financial markets will constrain his ability to do different things. To be honest, actually, François Hollande may actually be in a better position to implement the type of reforms I'm talking about. For example, it was the left-leaning government in Germany that imposed austerity measures in 1999. Why? Because they were able to negotiate changes with labor unions. And François Hollande may actually be in a position where he could be in a better position than Sarkozy to implement the type of changes I'm talking about. In the case of Greece, they're likely to continue with the current situation. They still need to get the 130 billion that's been promised to them from the European Union. So they're likely to continue to implement the austerity measures until they have obtained those funds, and then they'll ultimately default and go back to their currency. In the case of Spain, they're very likely, I would say, within the next 6 months to be shut out of the financial markets, so that they will need a bailout. And given their current needs, they will need about 100 billion. Okay, just to cover the expenses for 2012. Plus, they probably need 50 billion to recap, or at least to start the recapitalization of their banks. And most of those funds will be provided by the EFSF or the ESM. Okay, but then again, then the problem is that what happens in 2013 when you have Spain needing much more than 150 billion and no money really available. So that's the problem we have now, is we're throwing debt to solve a debt problem, and we're just pushing the problem into the future.
Frank, thank you very much for joining us. Dr. Frank will be back with us next week, applying his no-nonsense attitude to another financial hot topic. For now, though, goodbye.